Today, Donald Trump stepped up to a microphone on that one-year anniversary of his inauguration. His polling numbers have sunk over the last year, and he stood before White House reporters with a prop that he literally did not know how to handle and almost injured himself by touching a binder clip as if for the first time in his life. We saw what appeared to be an exhausted 79-year-old man struggling to pretend to be interested in what he was there to do.
Here's the book on accomplishments. And this is something, ooh, I'm glad my finger wasn't in that sucker. That could have done some damage, but you know what? I wouldn't have shown the pain. I would have gone back. Boy, did you hear that? That was nasty. But I would not have shown the pain. I would have acted like nothing happened as my finger fell off. That was a nasty. I think somebody did that. I think it was him. It was my man. How were you? You didn't do it. I know you did. I know you didn't. So, but here's the book. These are all things we have. I'm going to read a few of the samples, but look at this. These are all, each line is something that we did. Nobody did that before. And it's big stuff, too. Look, we have the hottest country in the world.
Nomination. In fact, the White House staff conveniently typed up and printed out Trump on a big stack of paper sheets to read from that listed his supposed accomplishments with bullet points like number 243. Stripped notorious crackhead and grifter Hunter Biden of his taxpayer-funded Secret Service detail. 245. Signed an executive order to end the use of paper straws. How can people not be celebrating the streets? How can he not have a 65% approval rating?
So,
the man is not well. He holds up the book that represents all of the accomplishments as presented to him by his staff at the end of one full year of Trump governance. And he treats it like a pizza box he has just personally emptied and throws it on the floor. On the floor. Who does that? He's there to convince the press that this document that he was holding before he threw it away is a serious document. And what he's going to read to us from that document is important. That's what he's trying to convince us of. And he throws it on the floor, just throws it on the floor. Donald Trump has the weakest mind we've ever seen in the White House. He's the weakest person ever to live in the White House. He is the crybaby in chief. He is not just America's biggest crybaby. He is the world's biggest crybaby. When he's criticized by someone speaking on a television network, he says the entire network should be closed down. What kind of crybaby is that? The worst kind, the adult kind. When he doesn't get a Nobel Peace Prize, which he will never get and will never deserve, he insists that the recipient of the Peace Prize should give it to him. And pathetically, she does. And because he is the weakest, smallest human being we have ever seen in American politics, he stupidly smiles and accepts it as if it actually is his own, as if it's real. And that crybaby stood there today telling us that for the first time in his life, he would be stoic. He would be brave. He wouldn't flinch if that paper clamp had hurt his finger, one of those little fingers of his. That's when he would have shown us how brave he really is for the first time, I guess. I would not have shown the pain, he says. The crybaby says that, the crybaby who shows pain whenever he is criticized in any way, whenever he is disagreed with in any way. What followed at that microphone today was the kind of Trumpian display of ignorance and lying that we have become accustomed to, but now it's the 79-year-old version after a year in the White House, and he is tired. He is weary, and he mixes up words. He says Iceland when he means Greenland, which we've all done at some point, but that's the kind of thing for which Donald Trump and much of the Washington press corps would have attacked Joe Biden for days if he ever mixed up those words, getting a word wrong like that. Donald Trump spent an hour and 45 minutes at that microphone in the White House, and the word Epstein was never mentioned once in that room. But the word Greenland was, which is exactly the way Donald Trump wanted it to be today. Imagine if Joe Biden or Barack Obama were in the 31st consecutive day of breaking a law that was specifically written to force them to comply with that law. Imagine Joe Biden for 31 days violating a law passed by Congress requiring him to hand over documents. That's what Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is 31 days into violating the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which requires him to turn over the Epstein files to Congress. And he didn't get a single question about that today because almost every question was about Greenland, exactly as planned by Donald Trump. By the time Donald Trump took questions from the White House reporters today, Donald Trump was exhausted, and his answers were shorter than usual. The questions were, as usual, bad. The questions illuminated nothing because, again, as usual, this was Donald Trump's favorite answer.
We'll see what happens. So we'll see what happens, but we'll see what happens. We're just going to have to see what happens, but, we'll find out.
That's not a president. That's a guy in a guessing game who has no idea what he's doing and has no idea what's going to happen next. The White House press corps specializes in weak questions like, how far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland? Why ask a question when you know there is no chance of getting an answer to that question or anything like an answer to that question from Donald Trump? So, of course, Donald Trump's wise guy answer was, you'll find out. And the White House press corps thinks they've got...
The world wakes up to the threat of Donald Trump.
This is an incredibly grave moment for the United Kingdom, Europe, and our world.
When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself.
From the planetary alarm over Trump's imperial aspirations.
Let me put this in words you might understand. Mr. President, off.
To the military on American streets, now a reality in Trump's America.
They're going to make mistakes sometimes. ICE is going to be too rough with somebody.
Economic warfare declared on enemies and allies alike, rampant corruption, and the rule of law under siege.
Trump is weaponizing government. It's terrible.
Tonight, where we stand after Donald Trump's first year, when all ends, starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It has been 1 year since Donald Trump took office, and it has been, I think you'd agree, brutal in almost all ways. Masked, armed federal immigration officers looking like they're in the middle of a war zone in camouflage and long guns are subjecting the residents of Minneapolis to a violent and lawless occupation. While the president muses about sending in American soldiers and has his Department of Justice almost by the day go after local elected leaders. The economy is deteriorating, from unemployment to inflation to the tariffs Donald Trump has levied unilaterally, hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars in taxes on the American people, also leaving America even more isolated. The Dow Jones dropped almost 900 points today alone. Just in the past month, Donald Trump has seized and captured the president of Venezuela, brought him to the U.S. to stand trial, and announced, we are taking their oil and selling it and then putting the proceeds in a private offshore bank account in Qatar that Trump controls. He's also threatened to bomb Iran, as well as numerous other countries. In fact, our closest allies in Europe are preparing for a possible war with us because Trump wants somebody to give him Greenland and a Nobel Peace Prize. That obsession and its consequences were on full display today in Davos, Switzerland, as the annual meeting of world leaders became an emergency summit, frantic almost, to deal with an American president who is, not to put too fine a point on it, acting like an evil madman. And they've tried all sorts of strategies up until today, and they're still trying to coddle Trump like a toddler, to flatter him. Now they're facing an ominous fact that has been staring us, Americans in the face for a year. The United States is a nuclear-armed superpower run by a would-be tyrant. And they are now talking about him like an enemy.
We need more stability in this world, but we do prefer we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
The fact is, Trump only respects force and strength and unity. That's exactly what Europe should demonstrate right now.
I would like to confirm that they are an ally, but then they have to behave like an ally. You live in a time of monsters, and it's up to him to decide if he wants to be a monster, yes or no.
Let me put this in words you might understand. Mr. President, off.
Things are so dire, the Prime Minister of Canada, our steadfast ally to the north, our neighbor, gave one of the best, most clear-eyed, sober, urgent speeches that I've heard a politician deliver in a very, very long time. And certainly not the usual kind of speech that we hear at places like Davos.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together.
The thesis of Carney's speech is that the old order has been destroyed, that it lies in ruins, that this isn't just a transition, but a disruption. And it wasn't just world leaders. Visitors in Davos could see a glow in those snow-capped mountains after the sun set this evening, after a group of 10 local residents hiked up the mountain with 450 torches to spell out one message that shone down across the valley: no kings. Donald Trump is set to speak at Davos tomorrow, but while the rest of the world is describing him as the biggest threat to peace and stability in the world, he was exactly where you would expect him to be, at a White House podium for a very, very long hour and 44 minutes. And I've watched, 6-year-olds play baseball. A very long hour and 44 minutes boasting about his year of accomplishments.
Should have gotten the Nobel Prize for each war, but I don't say that. I say millions and millions of people. And don't let anyone tell you that Norway doesn't control the shots, okay? It's in Norway. Norway controls the shots. And by the way, I did more for NATO than any other person alive or dead. Officially reinstated Columbus Day. I like the name Columbus Day. The Italian people are very happy about it. Remember, when you go to the voting booths, I reinstated Columbus Day. And I said to my mother, Mom, she would be there, always there for me. She said, son, you could be a professional baseball player. I said, thanks, Mom. We have a perfect system right now. We're making a fortune. We've never been stronger.
Do you feel like God is proud of the effort that you've put in?
I do, actually. I think God is very proud of the job I've done. And that includes for religion.
By the way, we saved you from some of those vile stuff he did, more racism heaped on Somali Americans and Somalians. But he did that for 2 hours, while the rest of the world described the United States as a rogue state bent on. All this comes days after Trump announced he was forming a board of peace to basically supplant the United Nations, a board run by him where he plans on charging member states $1 billion to have a permanent seat on the board. Trump has already invited heads of state like Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Benjamin Netanyahu to join, and strong-arm leaders from nations like Hungary and Belarus. Over the weekend, Trump also received a text from the Prime Minister of Norway. You saw him talking about the Norwegians before. He's obsessed with them. He's convinced that the Norwegian president controls the Nobel Peace Prize. And he got a text that was honestly kind of flattering and supplicant, like all of these messages tend to be, desperately seeking to ease tensions with the U.S. over its positions on Greenland, Gaza, and Ukraine. Trump responded by text saying in part, quote, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. going on to insist on taking taking Greenland. Now, this is an obvious point, and it's been made a ton, but it's worth reiterating today on this one-year anniversary. Us, Americans, electing Donald Trump is not just our problem for us. We have made it the world's problem because we have made ourselves the center of the global order. And the post-World War II global order has been predicated basically on U.S. hegemony. And to be real clear-eyed about this, and there's a lot of gauzy nostalgia here, that hegemony, that power that we have has been abused egregiously in many circumstances, in awful, bloody, and unforgivable ways, from Vietnam to Iraq and beyond. But that hegemony was also the ordering principle, along with a set of international multilateral institutions that were constructed, built on the big lesson of World War II, which is that autocratic regimes, expansionist empires, and fascists will create world war. And so we ended up with a system in which the world's oldest, most stable democracy, one of the victors of that war, was at the center to prevent that. And the best way to understand that structure, that post-war liberal order, is not as some liberal order, but really as a world war avoidance machine. The world war avoidance machine with the U.S. at the center has been running for 80 years now. And it's done a lot of bad things, but it has succeeded in that singular goal. And what we are dealing with today is what happens when the winners of World War II, one of them, realize the order they built is crumbling, and that the global hegemon is sounding and maybe acting now like an Axis power. Maybe we're the bad guys. And these allies are getting a daunting awareness that Americans in the anti-Trump camp have had from day one. Something that's been clear from the first day that he was sworn in, when he unilaterally pardoned all the January 6th insurrectionists who had stormed the Capitol on his behalf, including the ones that beat the cops on the head and the ones convicted of seditious conspiracy. These allies are becoming aware that the most powerful person in the world is a danger and threat to it and making the world order unstable. And that means we're all in a lot of trouble.
The festering carcass of American rot, shoved into an ill-fitting suit, the sleaze of a con man, the cowardice of a draft dodger, the gluttony of a parasite, the racism of a Klansman, the sexism of a back-alley creep, the ignorance of a barstool drunk, and the greed of a hedge fund ghoul all spray-painted orange and paraded like a prize hog at a county fair. Not a president, not even a man, just the diseased distillation of everything this country swears it isn't, but has always been. Arrogance dressed up as exceptionalism, stupidity passed off as common sense, cruelty sold as toughness, greed exalted as ambition, and corruption worshipped like gospel. It is America's shadow made flesh, a rotting pumpkin idol, proving that when a nation kneels before money, power, and spite, it doesn't just lose its soul, it shits out this bloated obscenity and calls it a leader.